Hey everyone, welcome back. It is Coach's Corner and I am Dr. Lori.
And I'm J.DP, and you are excellent. Today we're talking to Diane Thomson, who is a ADHD coach, and we're continuing our conversation from last time, where we had spoken to Diane, where she introduced us to, as a coach, how she works with leaders with ADHD. Today we're continuing that conversation. Lori, what are you expecting from today's conversation?
I really am looking forward to hearing Diane's perspective on is viewing, when we talk about people with ADHD, the word that comes to mind for me is scattered. Hyperactivity, right? I'm hoping Diane can help us reframe that, right? And think about that as not a deficit, but where that might be a strength. That's one of the things I'd really like to see because, it's easy to look down our noses, but it's harder and maybe more valuable to pick it up and say, all right, it doesn't work great in this particular setting, but maybe it does elsewhere. And I'm hoping she can give us some examples about that.
I'm hoping that she takes us down the road of resiliency, because resiliency is important, especially when we're working with clients with ADHD. How do we as coaches adapt and are become present with our clients, and find our own resiliency so that we can be focused when we work with clients with ADHD?
That's such an important topic. And if we look, there's been lots of data out. If we look at things that are going to be important in the next 5 years in the workplace, I think that is going to be one of the top skills. The world is turning faster and faster and faster, and we have to be able to be centered, not just us as coaches, but our clients as well.
It's like the old saying says, stop the world, I want to get off.
Sometimes I feel that way.
It's going to be a great conversation with Diane Thomson. So without further ado, let's get into it. Yeah, go.
Okay. Diane, it is so great to be back with you today. And I am delighted that we're continuing this conversation. And I have some questions for you. I saw something in LinkedIn this morning about the skills that are going to be needed by 2030, particularly with the rise of AI. And one of them, and I know you have strong feelings about this, and you maybe can share with us, is the importance of resiliency. I know I am seeing in my own clients now, with the turbulence we are seeing in the job market, with the turbulence we are seeing in the government and the economy, a lot of situational stress for sure, but ongoing stresses. Can you talk to us a little about how important resiliency is, how it shows up for folks with ADHD, and how we can support our clients?
Big question, but I appreciate the question because it is really important. It is. So I am going to put that in the answer that I'm going to add to that answer the importance of being present in our own bodies and aware of our own experience. Because that is really where resilience is sourced from. So, yeah, in the current political climate and the pressure on companies and then the pressure on employees, there is a lot of nervous system agitation, I imagine. And so with ADHD, one of the executive functions is emotional regulation. I mean, that's one of ours for all of us, emotional regulation. So that's that ability to be able to have a perspective, have an observation about our own experience versus being in the experience without and reacting without any kind of reflection or observation or say, whoa, what's going on with me here? So that's what I mean by how important it is for us to be aware of what's happening in our bodies, because part of that is, wow, I'm feeling so much stress in my head. I feel like I'm about to explode, or my stomach is in such knots. I'm so anxious. So our feelings are housed in our bodies. So that's where we get that body awareness. That's our source of our insight. We can think about our emotions, but it's our body that's telling us. So, okay, what do we do? So here, going to the other part of this is then we who may not have ADHD, who may not have that similar struggle, may be able to step back. And it's so funny, I'm going to physically say, step back, move away,
Right.
reground, and see what's happening. Notice your heart racing, notice your hands trembling, whatever it is. Notice that you're about to, jump at somebody and want to hit them. All of that. Step back and pause and use our breath. We have the most important, valuable tool inside us, which is our breathing. What do people do before they go into a meeting? What did we do before we started here? Okay, let's just take a breath.
I felt like I was hyperventilating. Normally, I get so nervous before I start these things that I usually saw me go through my ritual, which was my calming ritual.
Loved it. Yes.
Because externally I'm goofy, but internally my heart's going, and I have to center and calm down.
And because John and I have talked about this before, under stressful situations, and how to sort of center yourself before something happens. If you don't mind me jumping in and pulling one piece of that out, because as you were talking, I'm thinking back to 25 years ago or 20 years ago, Lori, who did have a hard time detaching from things and had a tendency to be very emotional about things that were happening. And you said something that I thought was really important, and that was the importance of literally taking a step back and walking away for a few minutes. Can I take you on a tiny little detour as a little bit of self-help for me and for others who might find ourselves in those situations where you flush or your heart rate goes up? How do we regulate, or how do we get back into some better sense?
Acceptance that is part of us and we are human beings. Do you really want to be a human being that doesn't have an emotional reaction?
Not particularly.
No. Yeah. And so, of course, in a business or corporate environment, we want to present ourselves as cool, calm, and collective. And so even with working with clients with ADHD, I lead them through practices. Now, I'm not some big guru, meditation person, Buddhist, none of that. But I am pardon?
Said you could have fooled me.
I am a body person, meaning I come from the world of dance. I come from the world of dance therapy. It's a valuable piece in a way I relate in the world. Sometimes. But so going back to your question, Lori, is that we can develop some sort of ritual or method. Like John, what you said when you came on, you felt that and you kind of had your ritual that you went through that was very physical. It was what you needed. It was, holding your head, calming yourself. What is that ritual that helps one regain their equilibrium and calm the nervous system? Because that's what we're doing. And that breath is calming the vagus nerve, which is that nerve, the cranial nerve that runs from your brain all the way through your body. So we use, and that's why breath is so accessible and valuable. And so before I teach classes, I do a very physical activity. I didn't remember to do it today. I probably should have. And I actually learned it from a somatic program. Richard Strozzi, he has a whole somatic coaching program, but it was a rowing activity.
Ooh, can you take us through that?
I wish I had the space on my desk. You want me to move my
It's that
Oh,
big,
no,
big
it's that big.
movements.
So that's the thing. I used to think, let me sit here and just breathe. And that didn't do the trick. I still was, and I did not, you're like, I don't like it when my voice cracks. But I realized I had to do something much bigger. So imagine, I'm just going to describe it. Imagine standing, having some space around you, and literally like you're rowing a boat, rowing. So my whole body is in motion, and even try it right now where you're sitting. It's calming me. And that physical activity, it gets your breath going, gets your body, where do we hold our tension? So yeah, big time for me too. Yep. So I've discovered, something like that, I can do that kind of activity. So now, of course, so for people with ADHD, the work is around recognizing, being able to stop and pause, being able to step back. Because remember the last time we talked, it was about stop and pause. And then remember, oh yeah, I have this activity, or I can breathe. So for people in corporations and business and offices, unless you get to work from home, you can find your way, may go in the restroom or go in a private space, or because there's going to be lots of, I imagine, my corporate world was working in hospitals, so I know that experience. But I imagine throughout the day, there's a lot of triggers or things that are distressing that one has to bounce back with or bounce back from.
And I think I was thinking as you were talking about, finding a private space to have these moments. And I think it's really important for people who are in, that so-called cubicle farm, right? Where there's not a lot of privacy to develop. I'm not sure they can do the rowing right in the middle of the cubicle, but they could find, a small, so I keep this worry stone in front of me, right? And it fits my hand beautifully, and I keep it there. And and exactly, we all have something, but there has to be something, and the bathroom, by the way, is also a very good place to do that. And, I know Amy Cuddy's work has been, questioned, but I feel better when I do the power pose. And so I think you're saying something similar, to physically move your body.
Yes. Yeah. And there is the more expansive work around somatic coaching and kind of deactivating, I don't know if that's the correct word, but I think it is, deactivating these old patterns and old responses and replacing them with new experiences of themselves. And I think of that when you talk about the Amy Cuddy work, because it is creating a new experience of oneself internally. When you put your hands on your hips and you stand tall, there is another experience of the self. And I am a big believer of act as if, and act as if until you feel it. But if we don't experience that other way of being, maybe the cooler, calm, more settled way of being, we need to experience that in order to get there when we need it. So, yeah.
And so over time, I'm assuming that this concept of resilience is built over time, and this is not a Band-Aid on top of something. How do we know when we've built that resilience? What does it look like to be resilient?
I think it's what it feels like. So taking one's perception of the world from only being externally focused to internally focused. And so in body terms, that's proprioceptive and interoceptive. Anyway, some words, just some words. But that sense
Those are some
of
big SAT words right there. I was like What? I need to pause this. I got to look that up.
Okay, and those are just words because I'm coming from dance and being, but anyway, so the idea that noticing that feeling, that sensation in your body, and it being one that, yeah, I'm not happy with this, I'd like to feel a little differently. So that experience of being able to slow down the butterflies in the stomach. So it's going from one state to another state, a more desired state, a state that will allow you to be the person or be able to function in a way that you think would be helpful. So at work, and this is going back to what you saw on LinkedIn with the skills, that resiliency is going to be a skill for the 2025 at work. So yeah, you could, because you want to be able to function in a way that will satisfy the company, your employer, et cetera. Yeah.
So we need to be able to say, part of what I'm hearing from you is that doing some of these exercises allows us to feel, to your term, right, about what it's like not to be in that state of reactivity. So that when we encounter a situation, where we might have been more reactive, we know what that feels like, and we can do some of these exercises to get us back to that point. But we have, it's really helpful to have somebody like you to teach us what that feels like, right? I asked you what it looks like, and you corrected me and said, no, it's actually what it feels like. And I think that's actually an important shift in perspective. It's what it feels like to me. Okay, I feel the butterflies. I feel my heart racing. What do I need to do to get to that point so that I am not down and out for a week because somebody was mad at me?
Right. May I bring in a piece about, because this is a channel for coaches, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
For coaches, by coaches, about coaching.
Yes. So while you were talking, Lori, I just noticed my upper back get tense.
Ooh.
And so I've been practicing noticing this stuff for quite a while. But just because I've been practicing noticing it doesn't mean that I'm going to always be calm, cool, and relaxed, right? I'm consciously sitting up in my chair right now, but that additional tension, I was like, whoa, what's happening here? Why do I feel tense? I didn't need to answer the why, because what I was mostly concerned about is that it was preventing me from really listening to what you were saying.
Interesting.
So whatever that internal dialogue went on for me, performance anxiety, whatever, I realized that was happening, that anxiety was happening in my upper shoulders, in the back, my shoulder blades. So, yeah, right. And why then I bring it into the idea of coaching is because as coaches, we want to be as present and open to our clients as we can. And if our bodies are relaxed and open, we can be more present, we can hear. And I don't just mean hear, but I mean hear where we can feel the experience, the emotion, the expression of what they're sharing. We can listen for what's being said without it really being said. And so as coaches, our own resilience is really important, our own ability to be present and centered so that I don't have all this other, thoughts bouncing around, or, "Ooh, am I doing it the right way? Or how am I going to be a great coach and be able to, give a good experience to my client?" All of that kind of performance stuff that kind of floats around for us. So the more we could just be present and be in that moment, and that's why, and that then therefore we can serve our clients better.
I love this. ICF talks about the core competencies of a coach, and you just underlined for me what is so critical, and that's that ability to be present, fully present. I'm all in on you, my client.
Yeah.
Stuff might be happening, stuff might have happened before, stuff might be happening afterwards. I'm here for you. And, I know in our coaching program, one of the lessons that I remember the most, I think it was said on the first day, was the greatest gift is to be truly heard.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And you've importantly pointed out that it's not just here, it's about the sense, and it's not just about what you say, but what's left unsaid and what we might read between the lines. And for us to be resilient and present, especially for having back to back to back meetings, to be able to give that presence to everyone.
In my coaching, as I'm doing right now, I am ensuring that my distractions are not here, right? Because again, the greatest gift you can give is presence. Because I have back issues, I am properly supported in my back so that those physical things are not sort of like distractors for me. My feet are warm and planted. And as you're speaking, my hands are like this here. And I'm rested. My shoulders are rested. I feel the calm and focused. When working with clients with ADHD, then how does you brought up your shoulders and you saw like your feeling? How is that playing in to when you're working with clients with ADHD?
It's a really good question. It plays in a lot. It comes into play when I'm not sure what the client is talking about. And last time I believe I mentioned that without being a person without ADHD, I've had to work to understand that experience. And so if they're sharing an experience that I haven't had a connection with yet, I get a little, I'm going like this. I get a little fidgety, like, like, see my fist just went, like, wait, what's going on? And, I get a little anxious, like, oh, I got to figure this out, or where are we? So that all kind of moves around. But if I can just say, yeah, you know what? I don't have to figure it out. I don't have to be that wheels, cogs churning. I can just be here, listen, and trust and allow that, and some understanding is something will evolve. I'll suddenly go, oh. And so I will, during sessions, when I start feeling that, whatever is the mishigash, I always think I say that word wrong, but in my body, I'll go, okay, whoops, just come on back and trust. And inevitably, something emerges to work with or to create clarity. And so that's part of it. There's also an experience of when there is what we call the fast brain, the person who talks quickly and shifts contextually, moves from one point to another. And I feel a little bit like, where are we going? And my body feels like it wants to get up and run after them and say, stop. So I get to reflect that back in a very kind, compassionate way. Can I let you know how I'm feeling right now? Because this is what's happening for me. And I'm wondering what impact that has on other people in your life. Or what does it feel like to you when you're talking? And what is that experience like for you internally? Are you aware that's happening? Because there's nothing, sorry, I see you want to ask a question. I'll just finish this. There's nothing wrong with talking fast, right? There isn't. Nothing. Except when it impacts communication or relationships.
my mind is literally battling me between wanting to say something ridiculously stupid and asking a question. So the stupid part, it's called the weave. There.
That's right. That's right. Yes, that's right. It's called the Weave by our king. Okay.
And in those moments where you're kind of trying to figure it out, but you kind of let it go, right, as the song says, and you're maintaining your presence. Are you then manifesting your resilience? Is that providing you some biofeedback when you just say, you know what, I have all these thoughts, but they're inhibiting my ability to focus on my number one thing is my client. And when you regain focus, then you're finding yourself in a place physically where you're feeling different. Your anxiety, one might call it, subsides, and now you're back to your center. Is that what's happening with you?
I think that's a really nice description of it. Yeah. Yeah. It is recalibrating my nervous system. I'm moving from that thinking expectations of myself, performance expectations, and I'm saying, hey, that's old stuff. I don't need that right now. Let's just go back to being here. That's what's valuable. So yeah, it's recalibrating my nervous system.
I always find that when I have those, this was another thing I had to really work hard to unlearn in coaching school, is to not confuse my definition of excellence and what I was delivering with what the client thought was excellent. So I might be saying, well, I should be. And the client, sometimes the best thing I can do is say to the client, what part of that do you want to unpack? That was a lot. That was a lot, Lori. What part of that do you want to unpack? So I'm not chasing, right? John and I have talked about this a lot. Don't work harder than the client. Let the client lead the journey. And I think that reminder for ourselves is part of that resilience. But I want to switch, I want to flip actually to talk about something else that you and I have had a brief conversation offline about. And that is another big vocabulary word, but I think you called it rejection sensitivity dysphoria, right? So there's a big technical term about this, and you can explain it to us. But I think it does relate to this idea of resilience and being able to bounce back from things. And so I was wondering if you could sort of describe that for us, and then we'll come back to talking about how it impacts folks with ADHD and how it impacts all of us, actually. But I'm really curious about this aspect of resiliency.
Well, to be clear, this is very specific to the diagnosis of ADHD.
Thank you for the correction.
Yeah, because it is seen differently in non-ADHD as more of a mood disorder or just a situational distress. So
Diane, before you begin, can you just rewind for a second and define what is RSD?
Yes, I will. Thank you.
What is that, please?
Yes. RSD stands for Rejection Sensitive Dysphoria. And it is not an official DSM diagnosis. It is, truthfully, I can't say the originator of that moniker, but William Dodson, who I mentioned last time, he's one who's done a lot of research on it and presents a lot on it. But RSD is about where there's a sudden mood change, but it's always related to a clear trigger. And that trigger is usually a sense of perceived rejection or criticism. And so it's an intense reaction where one feels great pain. One may even feel such great pain they double over. So it's different than, oh, I'm feeling bad, I'm feeling upset, or I used to refer to it for myself, and this was in grad school when I was going through some tough times and not feeling positive. I referred to it as the veil of shame, where I would feel just badly about my performance or how well I was doing. But that was kind of an overall sense. But this is a quick trigger response where then one either internalizes it, feels really bad about themselves, or one externalizes it, becomes really enraged and angry. I mean, those are generalizations, but that's how it, in essence. But it's usually when someone feels that it's a perceived rejection. It could be a rejection, but it doesn't have to be. It could be a misinterpretation of something that someone says. But with ADHD, Dodson says this is a neurobiological aspect of ADHD, but there's a lot of early sources or injuries that are can contribute to it, which is, history of people being criticizing a person with ADHD, always that sense of not meeting someone's expectations, not knowing why, why you didn't remember to do such and such, or you didn't show up because you forgot, or, these kinds of, criticisms that one has heard. But that, so then that's like the basis of it. So different than a mood disorder, which is something that builds over time and it lasts longer. The other aspect of rejection sensitive dysphoria is that one gets over it quickly too. So that's how they distinguish it from a mood disorder.
What would it look like if I were trying to help one of my clients? What would signal to me that this might be something that's going on?
Well, they get angry at you suddenly and you're shocked by it.
Yeah, where did that come from?
Yeah, right. Yes. So, for example, I'm very cautious. I do not say this to my clients. Oftentimes, clients will forget what we talked about prior, and right. And with ADHD, we look at ways one can journal or keep a notes, or to make sure that they reinforce their working memory on what we're working on. So I don't say to them, "Do you remember what we talked about last week?" Right? That would feel icky for any of us, because it's kind of like, what's wrong with you? But that could be a trigger, like, where I might even, so I have to be very cautious about it. I say, I don't know, help me remember, did we review this last week? Or maybe this is something we can review again, rather than saying what you did or didn't remember. So just, the language like that, to be very cautious about what might feel hurtful. Okay. So, right? I have a rule of thumb for myself that if my gut says, don't say it that way, I stop and I shift. It's a kind of a quick, message from my vagus nerve. No, that's not the right way to say it. If there's a little inkling that it might be perceived as hurtful or just heard wrong or different than what I meant it. So I pay attention to my gut around that. There's one other piece I wanted to share about that, which is one of the problems is, and this, you might see this in your clients at work, one avoids doing new things for fear of rejection might go wrong. One avoids social situations. I have a client whose son, who's failing to launch as a young adult, he needs to get a driver's license, but he's afraid to go to the DMV because he's afraid of what the people around the other side of the counter are going to think of him. There is a lot of fear of taking new actions or making decisions for fear that there'll be some rejection or something wrong with it. So
does that tie in with ADHD? Does this young person have ADHD? Because I've raised 3 daughters, and this sounds awfully familiar, but none have been diagnosed with ADHD. So I'm wondering if this is symptomatic of that age cohort, or there's something else at play?
Good question. Good question. So remember, we want to look for patterns over time and severity. But yeah, I think that of my son who refused because they were so used to ordering food by an app or something, he refused when he was in high school to make a phone call to order pizza. And I was bound and determined that this boy was going to learn to communicate to other people verbally. He can do that now. But I think there is a generational piece where having technology in between them and another person, there is just not having the resourcefulness. What's the word I'm looking for?
That sounds good to me.
Yeah. And confidence in oneself to put themselves in new situations, because I think they've had less need to do it.
And truthfully, right? I mean, we're still seeing fallout from the pandemic.
Yes, that's right. Absolutely. Yeah.
It hasn't gone away. I was teaching online during the pandemic like this virtually, and I saw it early and I've seen it continue. My own kids were in grad school during that time, and it's shifted things in more than I think just generational shifts, right? Because we couldn't go out, and those kids are going to live with that for a long time, and we are too.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
We are too. So I'm wondering if what we have missed in this conversation that you think is important to share with us and our audience that we should know about working with clients with ADHD and some of the issues that we've talked about.
Yes, we haven't talked about strengths.
Okay.
Yes.
Lead on.
So often what we see are the deficits, right? What they're not doing. But we're not looking at what they are doing, or what those 88, how to look at, reframe what's are the negative to positives.
Love this.
So I would love to do it. If we had time, I'd love to do a quiz and say, actually, let me ask you this. Is there one word that either of you can come up with to describe ADHD that not a strength, but how one gets perceived as?
Scattered.
Okay, good. Scattered. Yeah.
Yeah, the word that comes to is chaos.
Chaos. Right. So one might think that ability to be scattered is really, one has the ability to take in a lot of information at one time, to see more than others, let's say. That might be a way. Could be think of as creative. I value what my ADHD clients bring to me when it comes to the way they think and how creative they are, and that they can, in that kind of scattered, spread out way, they make really interesting connections. Yeah. So, yeah. And since we've talked about rejection sensitive dysphoria, one may be perceived as sensitive or oversensitive. But we could look at that as being really empathic, really aware of other people, which is really a positive. Yeah.
I really appreciate this reframing, right? I think that too often we as a society, want to put people in boxes. And sometimes people fit in boxes, but sometimes we have to acknowledge the strengths that somebody brings and find a box where they fit, right? Where their strengths allow them to blossom.
Yes.
Not everybody is going to be a great chemist. It takes a certain kind of brain to be a chemist. It's a very different brain than it takes to be an artist, right? And so let's acknowledge the strengths, and let's find an environment in which whoever we're working with can thrive, where that doesn't get perceived as a deficit, where the way that they behave is a strength in that particular environment. I really appreciate that reframing.
Yeah. And a really good example of that is ER doctors, because people in ADHD with ADHD rise to the occasion, that stimulation, that I need to act now, kind of impulse, what might be perceived as impulsive, but because that's where the brain chemistry is going. It's online, it's working. And so a good profession for someone with ADHD is an ER doctor.
Whoa.
And I've always thought that. So, but what I just have to say, I thought it was really fun. I just finished watching the TV show The Pit, which is on HBO Max.
I've been wanting to see
That's
that.
on my list.
Right. I avoided it because I didn't want to see another doctor show, but this was definitely worth it. One of the ER doctors comments during the show, well, you know why we with ADHD, we make great ER doctors. And I was like, I sat back on my couch and went, oh my God. So so that there is the right place for people. I have a client she's an amazing artist and musician and songwriter, really creative, does beautiful work. My mind's boggled by what she can produce. She can't pay a bill. She does. Let me correct that. She's been working on it. But she'd rather hire someone. If she had the money, she would say, I'm going to hire everybody to do all this stuff that I'm not good at, because she's great at her art. We don't always have the luxury to do that, but it's knowing where her real strengths are. Yeah.
Well, and it's a great example, right? I have a friend who followed their parent into accounting. So, right? I see in this friend that they're not happy, that they are struggling, right? Because it's not the right space for them. There are family pressures and societal pressures. You have to do something that makes a lot of money and you're a CPA, sounds really impressive. Not what this person wanted to do. And they struggled against it. And they're not a young person. Right. So they've been struggling against that for a long time. So I really appreciate this reframing that, even in accounting, by the way, there might be other parts of it that are more interesting to you. Maybe you like forensic accounting. Maybe you like auditing. Maybe you like tax. We just got through tax season. Maybe you really like tax and the detail-oriented part of that. So I think that we can help our clients recognize that if they're struggling in one environment, it may not be because it's them. It just may be the environment.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Say, Diane, you have talked about resiliency, RSD, and strengths that people with ADHD have by reframing how we look at people with ADHD. So, Lori, I'm wondering, and we're kind of pressed for time here. And Diane, you are a treasure.
Oh, thank you.
So thank you so much. Lori, bring us home.
Diane, I, again, as always, am learning so much from you and appreciate so much the perspective you bring to us. John just gave us a really quick rundown of what we've done. And I am going to take, just like I did last time, I'm going to take what you taught me today right back to my clients, and especially this perspective on reframing. So I really appreciate it. And for all of you out there, I hope that you will join us next time. And I want to give a big shout out to Diane and say thank you again. I will see you next time. It's Dr. Lori.
And I'm your coach, J.DP. And you are excellent. We'll see you next time. Thanks, Diane.
Thank you much. You guys are great.
We have been talking to Diane Thomson, a very well-known ADHD coach, and we've learned a ton. So I want to thank you all for tuning in. I hope you've learned a lot that you can take back to your own practice, and I hope that you will tune back in next time. I'm Dr. Lori, and
I'm your coach, J.DP. And always remember, you are excellent. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.